On the way out, or hand it to me or one of the members of staff, we'd really appreciate it. So you should all have a questionnaire on your chair right now. Okay, so once more, a very warm welcome to the EIP Water Conference for this afternoon here in Barcelona. We are joined by many people from all over the world who are streaming in live via the web. And we're anticipating having several hundred people now for this next session, which is coming up. We've been talking a lot about water and water innovation with a big focus, to be honest, on municipal services. And this next session is going to be taking a slightly different perspective, a slightly different angle, and talking about how big corporations are dealing with water, what they are doing, which is a very key part of their businesses. And I'm joined here on stage. Take a seat myself. Oh, that's good. Put the feet up. I'm joined here on stage by Mr. Paul Simpson. He's the CEO of CDP, a non-profit organization which has a recognized system for corporations to, well, disclose their risk to environmental issues, including water. Cate is the head of water at CDP, and we also have, representing the financial community, Mr. Pete Klotz. You're the senior advisor responsible for investment at PGGM. That's a Dutch pension fund. So what we wanted to cover in this session is how the increasing requirement for big corporations, for blue chip organizations to disclose their business risk related to water is driving innovation. But I think to set the scene, Paul, if I could ask you to first sort of talk about corporations and water, and maybe introduce CDP as well, because I guess a few people have still not quite heard of everything you're doing.
Thank you, Andrew. Good afternoon, everyone, and I'll try and do just that. So just very quickly, as Andrew said, CDP is a non-profit organization working globally. The focus of our work is really with the global business system. By that, I mean investors and corporations. We also work with cities, and we're really trying to develop and change the system so that we avoid dangerous climate change and protect our natural resources, including that of water. So to do this, we run a global disclosure system where large institutional investors, and we'll hear from Pete soon, but banks, pension funds, insurance companies are asking the companies they're investing in to report on climate change, water, and forests, what that means for their business, how they're impacting those environmental issues, but how those issues and the policy and changing environment is also impacting those companies. We're also doing this with big companies who are obviously procuring from many supply chains around the world. So how are big companies engaging their suppliers on the same issues? And we have cities also reporting on this. Just this year, we have 5,000 companies reporting through CDP on these issues, and that's more than 1,000 companies on water. And these are the large global corporations, many of them whom you hear with technology today, they might be your potential clients or acquirers. So what are these big corporations really doing on climate change? Well, what we see, and I'll talk about trends at the high level, and Cate will go more into the details of the report we're launching here today. What we see is that water is rising up the business agenda as a risk. And there are a couple of reasons why that's happening. It's obvious that it's a key ingredient component of many business processes, particularly for certain sectors, be that the mining industry, the oil and gas sector, but also agriculture, consumer goods, things like that down their supply chain. So it's rising up the agenda, and that's really because we see an increasing understanding of that water is a business risk and it can have financial implications. So real costs could impact my business now or in the near term. So through CDP, we've seen investor interest in water rising rapidly, some 400% increased in investors' interest in water information from large corporations since 2010. And as you all know, we see increasing real-world events showing us what water can do to systems, societies, economy, and business. So as we sit here, we know there are major droughts in California and Sao Paulo, among other places, but also companies are reporting real events impacting their own business. And just a couple of examples, and there's many more in the report. Barrick Gold, the mining company, had to suspend and shelve its investment in the Pascua-Lama mine. It was a $5 billion investment they'd made, and because of local concerns about water availability and water quality and pollution, they had to shelve that investment. So $5 billion stranded because of a water issue. On the different side, another mining company, BHP Billiton, has invested $2 billion in a desalination plant to provide the water it needs for its mining operations in the Atacama Desert. So, these are big sums of money. There, you could say on the risk side, on the perhaps more opportunity side, BASF, the large chemicals company here in Europe, says they can see up to €1 billion worth of new business from their water technologies between now and 2020. So this kind of highlights for big business both the risk and opportunity side of water. So this is going up the agenda, getting more into the boardroom, but, and of course there's always a but, there are a lot of companies who are not yet prepared. We ask companies, the investors ask companies through CDP to disclose on water, and there's still a lot of big companies who are not able to do that. Some big brands like Nike and Adidas, or Exxon, Shell, and Total, very big companies who should have a handle on this, not yet even able to report to their shareholders. And then additionally, of the companies who are reporting, and they should be congratulated for doing that, a lot of those still yet not very sophisticated in their strategies on water and their water stewardship. And I know Cate will talk more about that in a minute. So it's rising up the agenda. Awareness is really increasing. There are some leaders who should be held up as great examples, but there's a long way to go for companies to have a proper handle on water risk.
Okay. Could you just tell me how that compares to other risks which you at CDP have been covering over the past years? I mean, the origins obviously were more in the CO2 side of things, but how has that compared? What developments have gone on since CDP and others perhaps have been more aware of those risks?
Yeah, it's good to compare them. Clearly, we started in the year 2000 on climate change, carbon risk, and we started on water in 2010. They're not the same, as we all know, but they are very interrelated and linked. So we've seen investor interest grow 20 times on climate change in the last 10 years. Water's done that pretty much in the last 4 years, so very rapidly. The reason at CDP we started on water was that in about 2008, 2009, some companies and some investors said, look, for some sectors, for some regions, the water issue is going to bite us first. climate change, carbon, that may come later. And of course, that depends which sectors, which geographies you're looking at. In fact, one of our colleagues coined the phrase, if climate change is the shark, in some sectors, some regions, water will be the teeth. This is where the impacts are really felt. I think we have obviously, from a climate front, seen a lot of attention to this at the policy level. We heard a bit about that earlier from the water level. But I do think that companies see climate change now as a critical risk. There is in many places a price on carbon. It's not adequate or appropriate, a little bit like the water price. So there's a lot of things we can learn from the two. And clearly the interrelation of both, if we don't solve climate change, water risk is going to get worse, but also there's a lot of energy going into providing water where it's needed. So there's a great relationship between the two.
Excellent, thank you. Pete, it's no surprise that a Dutch man working for a Dutch pension fund has something to do with water. We have a number of esteemed colleagues from the water sector here, many from the Netherlands. But give us your perspective as a stakeholder in some of these big corporations looking after your customers' money as to why it's become so important so rapidly, as Paul has talked about.
All right, maybe my perspective is best shown in that slide that I've prepared for you. Can you put it up? And then I'll explain why I'm here. I got trained actually as a water engineer, and then I don't know what happened, but eventually I ended up on the dark side of things, and now I'm trying to invest money in a responsible way on behalf of a couple of Dutch pension funds. So we try to be a responsible investor, and ultimately that really means that we want to have a positive impact on the world's troubles and help solve them. Now, the financial sector, I've learned, is kind of lagging the corporate sector in its thinking about water. I think many companies, not the ones that have started disclosing through the CDP, but others, are still in a state of denial, perhaps. And that includes the investors. We don't quite believe there's a real risk unless we see it, happening right in front of us. And with water, that doesn't necessarily happen all the time, everywhere, in all walks of life. So that's what makes it challenging to us. I often get these questions, is water the next energy? No, it's not, because there's no price signal that we can work with. Scarcity isn't reflected in the prices. Yet it's material, we believe, and it's going to be more material down the road real quickly, as we see in this curve. So once we're out of denial, hopefully, the smart ones, amongst us at least, will see opportunities, and we hope we're amongst that group of investors. And if we grasp those opportunities, maybe we can avoid that all-out panic that is at the end of this curve. But I think the fact is, and this is why we're keen supporters of the CDP, that a lot of investors are really grappling with the sort of risk that water poses on their investments. And to some of you that may be surprising, NGOs have been at this for years already. But I think it's only relatively recently that we started explaining water risk as investment value at risk. And that's thanks very much to the CDP. So we are keen supporters to see more companies in more sectors where water is indeed a material factor to come out with relevant, comparable, and complete data. We're a big investor. We invest on the public side of things, so listed equities, in 3,000 companies. On the private side, in more than 8,000 companies. Let's just focus on the public side. We have a great interest on making it possible to start comparing companies by the amount of risk, the value at risk they represent. And we can move our money to the less risky ones from the high risk ones, once we have that kind of data. So again, there's great stock in having relevant, comparable, complete data sets. And right now, that's in the domain of voluntary disclosure. We'd like to see it mandatory, but that's probably going to happen one day. But for now, we really need to thank CDP for pushing this. It's true, and maybe there's another slide. Can I see that second slide? And if not, you can look at this for a while. I thought if we can't quite solve this water problem, at least I want my own curve, so, I can declare success right there. Well, that second slide, forget it. What it was showing is that what we're trying to get our minds around is the financial ways that water risk is impacting our investments. I think the best way to get the point across is indeed through growth that our companies can't quite realize anymore, because water is acting as a pretty immediate constraint already on their plans. Other factors are, like Paul just explained, are cost increases. You may lose your license to operate. There's all sorts of other factors, that discontinuities in your supply chains or your operations that have a material bearing on our investments. Now, better understanding that is the name of the game, as we're concerned. This is not trivial. You may think that an investor can dig deeply in any company it has an interest in. But the fact is that 50% of the world's money, and that 50% is it'll increase over time, a growing percentage, is managed through index funds. That means a little bit of everything. And we can only make the best use of that kind of investments the moment you can start compare and rank companies on the basis of their water riskiness. This is still in the domain of increasing awareness. We're building awareness with the CDP. But we're also in the opportunities business, and this may be of more interest perhaps to you. Our main client, one of those pension funds that we serve, our main client has articulated the desire to see its investments in solutions, as they coined it, quadruple over the next 5 years. If we can make that work for them, it'll mean an increase of 20 billion euros going into solutions for climate, water, food, and health. So water is one of the four. That shows that, an investor like PGM believes that this is going to be a big and increasingly important issue. It's not going to be easy, though, to find those investable opportunities. And the main reason is scale. If you invest 180 billion euros, you can't invest it in slices of a couple of 100,000 or 1 million or even 10 million. So we need aggregators. Aggregators like the EIB, for example. So there is an ecosystem of financial actors that I believe can serve your purposes the moment it can succeed in aggregating investment opportunities that otherwise would be too small for us to really go after. And that's simply a matter of capacity and cost. So awareness, thanks to the CDP. On the opportunity side, aggregation.
Pete, I think we'll have 25 action groups from EIP helping you to try and slice up that 20 billion which you're trying to invest over the next few years. I have no question about that. You might have to try and hide afterwards, but let's see about that. Now, I'm holding in my hands the it's still warm. Fresh off the press, the latest CDP report on water, the Global Water Report 2014. Cate, please take us through some of the major findings of this. You're the head of water at CDP. What does the report show? How long has the report been around as well? What are you building upon? And probably talk about a little bit the voluntary disclosure aspect, just to make sure that that is well understood.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Andrew. And good afternoon, everybody. So as Paul mentioned, the CDP's water programme has been around for 5 years now. So this report that we released today is our 5th one. We now have the world's largest corporate database of self-reported water data. Doesn't really exist anywhere else. It's self-reported, so it's disclosed by the companies themselves. When a company discloses this information via CDP, they're making a public declaration to their investors, and we rely on that to ensure that the data is of adequate quality for us to then analyze and create these sort of products that we release every year. It's free. It's available on our website. Please go and download it or pick up a copy in the back room there. This year, the report reflects 174 global 500 companies that have disclosed to us this year. Although we have had 2,200 disclose completely, you can imagine trying to fit the analysis of 2,200 companies into a slimline report is perhaps a slight challenge. So we've stuck to the small, really large, high risk, high impact, highly interesting sectors and companies from around the world. And what we're finding is that 68% of the companies that are included in this report are exposed to risks, water-related risks, that will pose a substantive change to their business, revenue, or operations. And from my perspective, while that is, it's a large number and it can be quite scary, I view that really as a wonderful opportunity. The fact that Andrew mentioned this increasing awareness of water-related risks and issues within companies, we're seeing that translating into action. And we've seen a shift in the way in which water is being governed internally. And I think this is down to the fact that there's an increasing recognition that the real value of water within an organization is not adequately reflected in the cost or the price that the company pays. But as Pete alluded to, is in fact resides in their business continuity, the ability to achieve a physical or a social license to operate, and of course that protection or enhancement of brand value. Interestingly enough, this year, 22% of the companies that responded, the Global 500, do report that these water-related issues are likely to pose a constraint to their growth. 3/4 of those risks are anticipated to impact either now or in the next year. These constraints are almost immediate, and therefore action to mitigate these risks the case for this is clear and compelling. And we are seeing shifts in the way in which these corporations are handling the challenges. We have seen an increase, for example, in the proportion of companies that have board-level oversight of water-related issues. In the past, that's been a relatively low, around the 40-50% of companies whose boards are regularly engaged on water issues. Now, when you start to talk about the fact that water may pose a constraint to your growth, that's not a conversation for the water manager who manages a wastewater treatment plant or the meters for supplies of facilities. That is, in fact, a conversation for the CEO and the boards of companies. So we're highly encouraged by the fact that this is rising up the agenda. I see that as, again, a unique opportunity, which means that purse strings may open a little bit easier within these companies. Investments will be driven to the teams that need them most. Water will be integrated into strategic growth strategies for organizations. For example, we ask companies to disclose their value at risk by a river basin. Now, that whole concept to a financial accounting team in most organizations is brand new. They don't really, what financial accounting team engages at a river basin level? Not many. They will have to now, as the investors demand that level of information.
It's not just about the bottom line necessarily. It's also about involving and engaging with the community.
Absolutely. We're seeing an increasing number of companies recognizing that action in their own direct operations is no longer adequate to ultimately deal with the water-related issues. Many of them are still focusing on direct operations, quick wins, low level of investments. However, we're very much encouraging them to look beyond their factory fence to understand who else is relying upon the resources that they're using themselves. What the regulators are saying, does a river basin management plan exist? And if so, go and read it and find out what your role is in implementing those. We incentivize that activity through the scoring and ranking and benchmarking of companies that we do. It's no longer adequate for a company to pursue becoming a clean fish in a dirty pond. They need to look beyond their fence lines and take action that not only provides benefits for themselves and ensure their own ability to grow, but also a more sustainable river basin overall.
Now, how is that, the question is, how is that driving innovation? We're here about connecting innovation, demand and supply. So what's happening? Have you got any examples perhaps of how that has been driving innovation?
Yes, yeah, and I think there's a range of innovation buckets, I suppose, that we would put it in. Perhaps the most obvious and relevant today is that of technology and technological interventions. Many of them are clearly very familiar to you. You know, we have mining companies such as Vale and Antofagasta pursuing desalination of water and using that in their mining operations rather than relying on freshwater resources. In fact, Antofagasta use non-desalinated water now in the sequestration of copper at their mines in Peru, which is really quite innovative. We're seeing more companies pursue reuse, recycling, membrane technologies, of course, but other areas of intervention and innovation often reflected in cross-sector technology transfers and knowledge transfers across sectors. And that's quite exciting. So when you get somebody within the mining sector going in to talk to the food and beverage sector to find out how they've been dealing with these issues, we get, again, a range of innovation. And finally, the third bucket of innovation is really one around governance and partnerships and collaborations, this idea of the clean fish in a dirty pond. We promote collective action within a river basin. We're now seeing pre-competitive collective action. Organisations such as Coca-Cola and PepsiCo, who perhaps wouldn't necessarily consider working together, have recognised that in many instances it's actually in their interest to combine their collective efforts to protect the water that they rely upon. Equally, we also saw Coca-Cola open up their data and share it with WRI in the development of their aqueduct tool. One point, we spoke about data innovation earlier. Many of these organizations have huge water data sets that they use for their own decision making. It's a huge, wonderful resource that we're seeing opening up in a few different sectors now. I think that's a nice opportunity.
Excellent. Pete, can I just ask you, on a satisfaction level, Paul already mentioned that, there's been a great drive towards water recently, a big rise in the interest in doing something there. But on a satisfaction level yourself, compared, well, let's say today, from 1 to 10, how happy are you about all the companies you invest in terms of their water disclosure?
Not that happy, really. I'm a pretty happy guy. But the problem with these index investments that we do, you invest in, say, 100 food and beverage companies. And unless you can compare all of them, you can't really compare them. So unless you can really rank the full set of food and beverage companies, you can't move your money from the high risk to the low risk ones. So the data aren't complete yet. They're relevant, that's good, and that's thanks to the CDP. They're also comparable, because this is the standard, de facto. But they're not yet complete. So on a scale of 1 to 10, a 3.
And how long will it be before you get to a 6 or a 7, sort of a mildly satisfied?
Yeah, that's a question that maybe Cate can also reflect on. We've seen an increase in disclosure on water. I think one thing that we've got to learn, and NGOs had to learn, investors need to learn, is that water doesn't necessarily matter everywhere all the time. So if we're selective, we don't need to cover the full set of 3,000 or 8,000 companies. Let's just start with the sectors where water is most material. Mining, food and beverage, energy, utilities. I think, in a couple of years, maybe 3 years, we should be where we want to be, where we need to be to really start ranking these companies. And this is a development that, we try to encourage companies to start disclosing through the CDP. And CDP, on its part, and Cate can elaborate on this, is starting to take this crucial step to start ranking companies, scoring and ranking companies. And we believe that in itself is very helpful to us directly, but it hopefully will also kick into motion a positive dynamic, a race to the top, if you wish. Whatever the topic is, especially in let's say, male-dominated industries, you don't want to be last. It's a contest in a way. So let's see whether we can indeed start off that race to the top.
That's an optimistic outlook, 3 years or so. Paul, I'd like to just come to you briefly. You have a global system. How does the situation differ all over the world when it comes to generally to reporting? Not necessarily water if you'd like to, but how are things, we're obviously in Europe here, how are things here compared to North America, to Africa, to Australia, wherever else you might have some insight to?
Sure, and I think it's general trends. Large companies do this better than less large companies, and that almost doesn't matter where you are in the world. But then specifically geographically, Europe generally on disclosure is leading, would be that on climate, water, or other environmental factors. Actually, the big main markets, the US does quite well, even though it has got less regulation on a lot of these issues than Europe, because these are big global companies, they've got global investors, so they get that kind of pressure. If we look to the emerging markets, it's a very patchy picture, but places like Brazil and South Africa, because they have quite developed markets, they have really well-functioning stock exchanges, they have quite strong disclosure on these issues. And then perhaps, as you might expect, countries that looking at what we call the BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, that in India is doing quite well, but not as good as Brazil and South Africa. China is changing fast. Literally, when we started working in China 5 years ago, there was a feeling, is disclosure allowed by Chinese companies? That's changing a lot. It's becoming more transparent. And the Chinese government is doing a lot of regulation on environmental disclosure. Some of it is not public, it's just to the government, but increasingly we think that will become very public. And just on this sort of voluntary question, of course, disclosure through CDP is technically voluntary. There's no government mandating it. But a lot of big corporations say to me, Paul, please don't call it voluntary, because we've got our biggest investors, who may own half of our shares asking for it. We've got our competitors doing it. And we feel in the modern world, this is something we have to be doing. Now, of course, not all companies are there. There are some companies trying to hide, and we do need regulation so they cannot hide, to create a level playing field. It's great that the EU Commission is advancing non-financial reporting under the Accounting Directive that will see thousands of European companies have to report on environmental information in their mandatory filings.
Excellent. I'd like to give the last word to water, of course, and I'd like to give it to Water Innovation, which means Cate is here. We'd like to know from you how EU organizations, could be SMEs or anyone else involved with innovation, can participate in this potential massive market and all the 20 billion that Peter's going to invest in, purely in water, I think. No. I know you said other sectors as well, but I guess 99.9% at least in water. But how can we participate in all this in the EU?
Wow. Well, in 2015, CDP for the first time will be issuing our water questionnaire to 375 of Europe's largest companies. That's thanks to support from the Stavros Niarchos Foundation and Suez Environnement. Apologies, my French accent is terrible. I'm from Liverpool and it doesn't come naturally. However, I gave it my best shot. So we will be, thank you. Yeah. We will be engaging these companies for the very first time, asking questions such as, are you exposed to water-related risks? How have you calculated that? What are the opportunities that you may be facing, and how are you capitalizing upon those? What volume of cash are you investing? Where do these opportunities and risks lie? That in itself is a field, in a sense, that I see we're planting here for you. We're sowing the seeds next year. We'll be watering it. I might put a few little ponds in. The door is open for as many institutions as would like to engage with us, to come and explore opportunities, for us to work collaboratively to ensure that the actions that are taken by these corporations are meaningful, that they actually contribute to tackling the water challenge within Europe and help us achieve the Water Framework Directive. The EIP platform, we'll be working closely with Robert over the next few years to think about how we can better link CDP's data, our public data, with that platform so you can learn what's going on. In this first instance, however, if you go onto CDP's website, we've just created an online data visualization where you can dive in, and I say all of this is for free. You can dive in by country and find out who's reporting what are the opportunities, what are the interventions these companies are pursuing. Many of them may already be your clients, many of them may be looking for new clients, and I'd suggest that while this year we had the water managers from 4 member states on the stage, it might be interesting next year to get 4 major corporations up on the stage and have them pitch their ideas and challenges to you, and you pitch back to them perhaps. But I very much look forward to working with many of you.
Thank you. That's an excellent suggestion to conclude our panel discussion here. Big round of applause, please. Now, Cate, I'd like to ask you to stay with me, please, because we're going to come to a concluding panel session here, which I'd like to just briefly introduce. And also ask your fellow panelists to come and join us here on the stage. What we really wanted to do is to talk about the barriers and the bottlenecks which are there now, which are stopping us, for whatever reason, to profit from the potential we have in the market and for unleashing all the great innovation which we know is there. So let me introduce to you Again, Mr. Thomas Michel. Thomas, please come and join us here up on the stage. Wim van Viersen, as you wish. Wim. Monica Scatasta. And last but Florian Witzenberg from earlier. And last but not least, Gernot Klotz. Gernot is the Director of Research and Development at CFIC. Thank you, Thomas, I was about to do that. The Director of Research and Development at CFIC, the European Chemical Industry Council. And you're going to give us, from an EIP Water Task Force perspective, your views on some of the major barriers, and I think these are representative of things you've been working out in the group. So I'd like to ask our panel to pay attention to what Gernot is going to be talking about here. And we're going to go into the discussion in a bit more detail just after that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm representing the chemical industry, who is on the one side a big water user, but it's on the other side also a supplier of membrane pipes and all the solutions on the topic. So I would like to give you a little bit an outside-in view, because most of the discussions today were, say, within the water sector as a topic. And I want to start off with a remark that we have discussions in various areas of the EU Commission currently, and that is that research and innovation are different topics. They are linked, but again, I would like to say that research is turning money into ideas, and innovation is turning these ideas back into value for society. And if it's not on the market, it is not innovation. Full stop. I think we should have this as a kind of working hypothesis when we discuss all the activities there. We have another challenge, and I also would like to raise this. We have not yet discussed about the global dimension, because it's not the question, is water important? Yes, it is, of course, a question. But will the solution come from or through Europe? Other regions of the world are working on this now. Brazil, China, on technology, Singapore. They all already own a lot of water utilities here in Europe. So let's look at what is then Europe's benefit on this topic. And there I must say we face the famous valley of death that was mentioned this morning. We are leading still in patents. We're leading in publications. And when we come to implementation and benefit from it, we are somewhere in the back burner on the topic. And give you another argument from the key enabling technologies. In solar panels, Europe is the world leader. We have the 80% of the world market. There's no manufacturing anymore. Batteries, same. And I think we run the same topic if we do not look at the holistic thing for the water sector and the water using sector, and very much like the proposal from the European Investment Bank that we have to see water in a larger context. The manufacturing industry is making its decision on investment, on is the water supply still there. It's not only the public areas which are there, and I think that's also the role of the EIP to bring this all together. So first of all, I think Europe has to decide, do we just want to be a knowledge creation economy, or do we want to also be a knowledge exploitation economy as we go forward? And this has serious consequences. You know, I'm not just saying, it's not just semantics on the topic. Can we get the critical mass going? We have 28 different research policies. Do we afford then 28 different innovation policies as we go forward? Do we really want a common European market when we have 60,000 cities and municipalities where the money coming in from the water companies is also used to fix other holes in the investment of a city on the topic? What can we do to really establish this one? And can we all then bring them together under a European umbrella? Or do we have to now reach out to all the local municipalities one by one by one? Speed was mentioned. Like I said, while we are discussing, others are already moving forward. So the timely implementation of all this is of key importance. And just one thing, for instance, the manufacturing sector currently is investing into energy efficiency, resource efficiency, new ways of doing things. And water is a part of this. So it's not a separate investment in water, it's included. And I think we have to see how we can best do that. Pilot and demos, I think they are essential on this topic. Because, be honest, why should I, outside Europe, buy something if you don't even have a home market to prove that the people want it? And we see it in many areas. Brazil is asking, why should I buy from you if you don't build it yourself on the topic? And then we come to export as we go forward. It was already said, what is then the specific question on Europe? And it was said, risk-averse, fragmented. Also, I just want to add something. It's more about renovation or building things that are existing. It's not new investment. I don't have a green field and I just build water plant after water plant. And also that has consequences as we go forward. So in the light of that one, the task force has looked at the barriers and bottlenecks, which we think is important in this setting. And of course, we all could put a list out and we get 25 barriers and bottlenecks, we can get 100 barriers and bottlenecks, where we go. So we set a priority of where we can do something rather soon and do not need a huge structural change. And of course, the one is the funding part, the financing part, if I may say. So maybe funding is even the wrong way, the financing part of this one, because it looks only at Horizon 2020 and research grants and all these kind of topics. So combining funding is a word. But do we need combined funding, or do we need specific funding for specific stages of the innovation chain? Because for me as a company, I will never go into a joint funding where I have then Horizon 2020 funding, regional funding, and other public funds, and I have to play 4 times the rules of that topic. If I have to go there, I'm dead anyhow. Also pragmatic, I would like to say that it's very good that it was mentioned, even for the EIB, you have certain, if we talk about 20, 50, 100,000 euros, simply the administrative costs to distribute it on that one will be too much. So how can we really do also with these smaller funds as we go forward? Now, regulation is the second one. Sorry, I jump a little bit. Okay, let's go to procurement on the topic. There, of course, the question is at the moment, it needs a sophisticated discussion, because the procurement has not worked in the last 10 to 20 years. And in the policy world, we all say procurement is a topic. But here we're talking about innovation procurement. And of course, we're talking also about people wanting to buy something which is new and innovative. And you should have 50 years of experience that everything goes right. And I think that's a challenge that we have to put forward. So really, procurement is something which we all dream of, but can we really break it down into concrete actions? And one topic I just want to mention, why not also include that all these things could be made mainly through European technology building blocks. We can build a water plant with ICT from US, we can build it with materials from the Middle East, and we can build it with membranes coming from Asia. Do we want this as we go forward on the topic? Public-private partnerships, we said fragmented, cooperation of small players. Can we all give this a home to discuss these kind of topics? Just again, we have around 60,000 cities in Europe. I don't want to talk about how many water utilities we have. If they all have different rules and, how are you going to ever scale up something which can be helpful? And again, it has not worked in the past, and it would also be an opportunity, because if I would ask now today to all the Dutch and the Spanish people to walk out of this room, I'm not sure how many different countries are still sitting then here at the table. Yeah, and it's not, we talked about the Eastern European, how can we get them on board? And you see all the pilot lines, they're all in the Western part. Let's see how we do that. Public-private partnership, we did that one. Showcases. I don't have to talk about this, of course, the city region procurement, diversity of demands. We have to give some people to show something, because on the one hand, everybody is shouting for innovation in the water sector, but on the other side, when we wanted to have in Germany public procurement on water European-wide, within 1 week we got 2 million signatures saying, I don't want a Romanian to take care of my water, my drinking water. So there's also a psychological topic on the topic. Last but not least, the regulatory topic, and here I would like to stress again what we thought it's not only about new regulation, it's also the interpretation of existing regulation. We see that we have gold plating of European regulation, we have an interpretation which gives us opportunities, because if new regulation comes up, like the revision of water, this will take years and years until it's really there. I think it will not help us very much on the topic. Then we also have to link, of course, then with the regions and the local authorities, because I would not even count, and maybe Thomas can tell us how many different regulation and standards do we have all across Europe. I think it's even more than 60,000, because every city has its own thing as we go forward. So I think that's maybe in a nutshell I want to give you. Keep in mind, innovation is about change. And also not only technology, but also things that we do things differently. And water is a cross-cutting and emotional topic. So if you come back to the investment, why shall I, if I have 100 million euros, unless I'm very ethical, why should I invest in the water sector? Why should I not invest it in the new football player for Barcelona? Because from the sales of your shirt, I will get much more money back, much more quicker on the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gernot. Okay. Now, I'm going to stay in the audience. That's it. The mic's working again now. Because we want to challenge some of these theories and concepts and some of the low-hanging fruits which you described, Gernot. So I'm going to sit down to do this. Thomas, I'd like to turn to you first and talk about, obviously, the third aspect, PPP. We have public-private and public-public partnership. We know what your definition is exactly. Where do you see, however, if we go into more detail, the real bottlenecks for public and private partnerships? We just talked about a cultural aspect of inviting people from different countries to come and operate my local water facilities. Is that one key issue, or where do you see some of the real problems which we need to resolve there?
The bottleneck or the difficulty to overcome regarding public-private partnerships, which is the concept I would like to stay with rather than public-public, is essentially most of what Gernot just told us. Okay, there needs to be a framework. A public-private partnership is at the very end, and I think that it's its value, it's a contractual issue. So it's not anymore about talking to do things or planning to do things. It's about getting things done in a specific way with certain rules under certain conditions, and that is contractual. Now, the private partners of such a partnership, they have essentially, they see many of the obstacles that Gernot was mentioning. So they see heterogeneous regulation, they see many different interlocutors, they see all these types of problems. And Gernot finished by saying, why should I invest my 100 million in water and not somewhere else? So this is what needs to be overcome in public-private partnership. Now the idea we generally have about public-private partnerships are large programs where public and private agree to certain funding schemes, cost sharing, etc., etc. I think to also be able to provide a solution that we have to take this public-private partnership concept down to the, let's say, to the lower case projects and opportunities. A public-private venture could be a showcase pilot for the EIB, for example. As a matter of fact, a public-private partnerships is many times a consortium for a Horizon 2020 consortium. So I think we must develop this concept of public-private partnership further and obtain through that, by doing, a much needed cultural change. And then when people sit together and partner and actually execute these partnerships, we will be learning by doing. And I think this will be improving.
Okay, let's turn to the Netherlands. Wim, stay on that aspect, if you would, of public-private partnerships. Obviously, a lot of that activity goes on in the Netherlands. And what's your experience in maybe some of the cultural aspects and the acceptance aspects of that? Gernot already talked about, a general acceptance, but as soon as you say, okay, we're going to have an operator from, I think you mentioned an Eastern European country coming to do some stuff with us here, then there's a public outcry. In Germany recently, there was a big anti-privatization of water discussion going on, and the amount of signatures that come together in the shortest amount of time is quite incredible. It's a very sensitive issue. What's your experience in the Netherlands there?
Well, as all countries, we put a lot of money on innovation, and of course politicians would like to see the return coming straightforwardly coming back to the Netherlands, and we all know that sometimes you have to make a detour through other arrangements, international arrangements, to see your money flowing back. In essence, I think that the science community and smaller companies are looking beyond borders. But not to blame politicians for everything, because I think they do a lot of things quite well, given the situation. But there's a lot of sort of nationalistic feelings about innovation and new startups, and bring everything to the Netherlands, or bring everything to Germany, or bring everything to a province even. A good example is that some of the smaller cities have people who go to Asia for new opportunities for companies. I mean, so everybody is looking for new ventures, but there is no critical mass, I think. So Europe is badly needed to organize, I think, innovation. We really need it.
Gernot, let me ask you to put on your hat as a representative of the chemical industry, if you like, and that's your background, obviously, over many decades. Tell us how the collaboration in that form maybe works in a chemical industry, not necessarily related to water, but it can do if you wish. How do you get the partnerships working in that industry? Are there cultural aspects? Are there sensitive issues that you need to overcome?
Oh, I'm sure there are. And I think that would be also, if I would like to make a proposal, maybe we should also focus and cut the activities a little bit. And maybe if we want to solve the industrial use of water and the drinking water at the same time, we might overstretch the system. So maybe we can say, let's make a priority and make, say, some dual use, that we have communities and industry together on wastewater, water reuse, these kind of topics, and then build the trust from the EIP, which will then help us, if we can showcase something, jump then over into the more drinking water related topic, and at the same time maybe already prepare the ground a little bit for that one. I think from the industry, if it's an inner industrial topic, I think at least the basic wording are the same on the topic.
Understood. Okay. Monica, I'm going to ask you, from your perspective, maybe to just talk on some of the cross-sector initiatives and how we can learn as well from other industries and things that you've experienced there. We did talk about it a little bit in the session just before. But when it comes to overcoming some of these bottlenecks, should everyone leave the water industry and go and do something else for a few years and then come back? Or what's your view?
You're talking to a water person, so it's going to be exactly. It's going to be a bit tricky for me to answer that. I'm not leaving my sector for the time being. Anyway, I would like to say a couple of things actually. First of all, before I go into the cross-sectoral aspect, just listening to this discussion on PPPs and the way in which we might want to bring it forward, I think that given the reactions, very often based on confusion about concepts that we see when using the private word in a water context. I think that there's a lot that can be done in trying to be very clear about what we mean and maybe finding new ways of defining what you're trying to, let's say, encourage under the PPP discussion for the EIP. Because there's the risk really that there's going to be a reaction based simply on old adages, and we got to be really, really careful about that. The issue, therefore, of thinking of public-private partnerships that have to do with eliciting additional knowledge and expertise is one thing. Trying to leverage private funding is something else. I mean, all these things, I think we got to use this platform as a way of making some clarity about these issues to avoid exactly the type of reactions that might come. So, okay, that's an aside, but with regards to the issue of working beyond the water sector boundary, I would like to reprise, and now I can do it post-CDP, so it makes probably even more sense, one of the points that I was trying to push for before, i.e. the importance of looking at ways in which the industries, the water-intensive industries in particular, are increasingly identifying water risk as biting them in the back and hitting their bottom line as a way to encourage and possibly leverage funding from them for solutions elsewhere. What Cate said before, you cannot be a clean fish in a dirty pond, means that you can be the most efficient company with the most efficient plant. If water runs out because it's being used elsewhere, that's not going to help you. So these are the type of activities that together we can start thinking about and we can try to pursue. One of the points that was raised also in the previous discussion that I think links up with the discussion on fragmentation of funding is the issue of how do we aggregate and how do we deal with the transaction cost of dealing with small amounts. You can do it in many ways. We've looked at in the case of Innofin, what we're looking at is intermediated solutions, okay, where we don't go directly, we go through intermediaries. But we're experimenting, we're innovating internally, and for instance, I want to just mention one case, which is in the water sector, but can be used in other sectors as well, waste, we're trying to replicate and scale up. And it's the Hydrobond project in Italy, in the Veneto region, where we had in front of us 9 smaller utilities, which were not investment grade, and whose investment program was too small for us. And we managed to set up a structure, and we can discuss it if you're interested, in a way that they could issue then a bond that was actually meant also for the pension funds, and in which then the EIB could invest. So there are solutions out there. This could be replicated also for innovation. So beyond Innofin, we can think of new ways in which we can use our existing instruments. Final point, and then I'm going to just leave it. You raised an interesting point about should we try to combine funding instruments or parse them so that you avoid. I think there are pros and cons. You can do both. You can look at those situations and try to isolate instrument. Well, first of all, it's important to have specific instruments that go with the specific needs and characteristics, and that's an area where we absolutely have to discuss. The second is, in those situations where it might be too complex to actually combine, indeed, no. But there may be situations, I'm thinking of one specific example, where if I look at all the instruments that the EIB group can provide, where we could work together with, say, a utility, but at the same time who may be working with incubators in a specific city, looking at ways in which even maybe the setup of the city could be modified, and therefore the system could be modified. We have very different instruments within the bank that we could use to support the different aspects of this activity, but we haven't done it yet. So that's another avenue that we might want to pursue. I'll leave it there.
Florian, let me bring you into the discussion right now. Does this sound so high level, so far away from your daily business that you say, it's great to hear about this, but how's it going to help me? Or is there anything there which you can relate to as an innovative SME that has not yet given up hope of doing good stuff in the water business?
It's far from where we're working at, and basically the whole day is very far off where you as a startup. And I think, by the way, startups, especially in this age, are where the change is. There's a big gap between startups and what we're talking about here, and one of the things I've learned in how I recruit people in my firm is I want to see things being done, and there are two groups of people. One groups always have 1,000 reasons why things weren't done, and they're all correct. There's a very small group that get things done, and they never complain about the barriers they faced. They always thank the others that things were done. And I think the setup of also this session is on barriers, and I think we have to focus on success. And we have to analyze the success and what have people done to achieve the success. Like I said in the morning, it is about people, and people can achieve tremendous things. There is a specific challenge, I think, in the water sector, and it relates to your comment where you started off with, and I think it's completely correct. Innovation is when it's on the market. But there's a challenge with the market, the water market. You could argue, is there a water market? It is by definition, because we don't want risk in the water market. It's ruled by governments. And therefore, there's not a lot of incentive for innovation. I could think of 3 solutions to that. One is, I think, if I understood it well, one of at 2 o'clock presentation was on more privatization in the water sector. That's probably far off if we ever get there. If I hear the objectives in Germany once Colic European members try to enter the water market, if that's the reaction, I'm not sure if we will ever get a true water market where innovation is competitive. So I'll stick to the recommendation I've made in the morning, where allocate 3% of your budget for innovation, see demonstration sites, truly be curious on what it can bring to you and make it happen.
Great. Cate, I'm going to bring you in here and talk about the dissemination area that Florian's talked on, and Gernot as well. Obviously, what you do is dissemination at the end of the day, but coming back to the corporations, really, which are disclosing through CDP. I get the feeling that we really struggle in some areas here, and we've heard examples today, to really talk about some of the great things that have gone on, how we've brought barriers down. How does that maybe work in the corporate sector? And you talked as well about companies even who are fierce competitors, even disseminating information amongst each other for the common good. I'd like to challenge you that it's a lot more to do with the bottom line, but maybe you could just reflect on the dissemination area, and we could get some input from your perspective as to how to break down the barrier here.
Sure. The corporations that we engage with have a range of different avenues that they use to disseminate information about themselves. CDP is one platform. We're very specific. We have a very specific audience at the end of the day whose on behalf we're asking for this information. They obviously then have their CSR reports, their websites, and everything else where they can talk about all of the very positive things. And there is a lot of positive things going on. not naively necessarily because it's for the greater good, and that's why it's important for the likes of CDP and others to ensure that interventions that are being made are actually, the profit motive isn't always winning over environmental and social improvements that could be realised with a more meaningful action plan in place. We at CDP are trying to open up our data base. I mentioned earlier that it's really large. It's probably our biggest tool and our greatest asset. And we hope that that in itself can be used to spark ideas and innovation and be used by as many institutions, academic and financial and governmental as possible. The benefit of sharing stories and case studies and examples and the benefit of disclosing that information either to CDP or to other initiatives out there is that it gives us an opportunity to stop reinventing the wheel. We want to ensure that action, we know that the challenges we face are so great, we need the action to happen as soon as possible. This issue of dissemination, of communicating with integrity, and the topic of transparency in general is relatively new to this space. And I believe that whether you're a water supplier or a water user or a policy maker trying to manage water resources at a river basin or a national or an international level, this entire topic of transparency should enable us to move forward much more rapidly, and will build confidence in the citizens whose on behalf we're all trying to operate here, and help shake down some of the barriers that Monica mentioned around misunderstanding or misinformation about the role of certain actors within this space. There's a piece of analysis that was undertaken by Veolia that intimated that there's $63 trillion of GDP that's at stake if we don't change our business as usual approach to water management. That's a startling amount of growth that is at risk. We need new models, we need innovation, we need startups, but we also need the large players to also change their behaviours and understand the role that they should play.
Okay, Gernot, staying on the area, if you could pass the mic along, please. The area of dissemination still. How would you see some of the things that you may see from the corporate sector and the things that CDP have been talking about? Have you learned anything there which we could use in trying to pick this low-hanging cherry?
I think what we again need is an analysis of where Europe stands. You know, I'm employed, I'm not only in Cefic, I'm one of the companies we mentioned, the company Bayer I work for, so I'm happy to see the logo up there. I just want to come back to the topic, because once we define water as a resource, this has certain consequences. When we say it's not only a public good, it is a resource. So we are, and if we want to take some value and we privatize in a way, we are up in competition with other regions of the world who have a fully fledged public-private partnership. In China, it is public-private because the companies are owned by the public. In Singapore, it is a public-private partnership. In Brazil, so I think we have to see really what do we want then from this, because we are not unique if we define it as a resource. Yeah, and even in Africa, we're competing then to selling things into markets where other companies come in who get their supply from somewhere else. And the other part is, of course, we are thinking about. There was this famous word of emerging pollutants. We have completely different standards. You know, other parts of the world are simply, they would shout ole if they have the standards of European water on the topic. So the question is, if we want to drill this spiral forward and forward, I'm not against, but the consequence of that one is that we de facto create a kind of niche market if we do not bring them first up to speed, so that then for our next step, they are ready and we can sell there, and then other companies come in and get much better investment on the topic.
Okay.
So that would be my take. I think still, also the EIP, in the discussion, we have not really come to grips, or we still have to come to grips, what is a real European challenge, and how we can make the European thing then helping the world in a way, without only ethical, which we need, don't get me wrong. I'm a father of 2 children, so I'm also worried about the water resources and. But our decision to talk about it as a resource has some consequences. Or we have to make it a fully public good and forget about all the privatization then the other consequences we should also then see on the topic.
Okay. Right, at that stage, I'd like to try and invite some questions to our panel from the audience. I'd like to focus it, please, around the 5 barriers identified. If we can have them up on the screen, I'd appreciate that. I think that should be possible, just to click into the screen and have the 5 barriers. We have some microphones out in the audience. Who would like to go first? Please be as precise as you can, Albert, and tell us who you would like to address your question to in the audience, in the panel.
Okay, I forgot your name, but the kind of white suit.
It's Florian Witzenberg.
Because you addressed that there are also chances, and I see the same. There are many barriers, but and I agree about them in Europe. I also notice that they are there, but I also see chances. And when I look to Europe, I see we are perhaps the wealthiest area in the world and the most happiest people in the world. And why can't we use this for water and water treatment technologies? Because if we remove all those emerging components from this water, we could have the healthiest water in the world. And we are not only selling those bottles all over the world, which we are doing now, but we can also these technologies, and we have not developed them yet. So this is a chance.
Your question was exactly?
Could we address health and happiness as drivers for development of water treatment technologies?
And that was addressed to Florian? Okay.
Go for it. Good one, Harry. Go for it.
Is it a rhetorical question? Because I don't have the answer. Can you give us the answer?
Let us pass the question over to Wim, because I'm fairly sure that it will be more in his field.
Happiness, yeah, that's definitely, that's my field, yes, for a long time already. Well, I would like to refer what has been said. I think that many people would be very happy if they would have the average water quality of Europe. So selling it, I don't know whether it would work through the happiness index of Albert. I don't know. Chances are low. I think there are many other sort of constraints in the lives of people than having a better water quality than in Europe, for instance. So developing water quality more in Europe and then trying to sell it through more happiness. To be frank, I don't know whether that's sort of really a business model.
Okay, let's field another question. We have one. The gentleman in the yellow tie there in the middle, please, and then we'll come to here and here. Your question, and to whom would you like to address it, please?
Hello? Yeah. Mr. Mitchell, to you, if I may draw a parallel in the internet space where a young company like Skype comes to a large player like British Telecom and offers its product, and it passes later to recognize the success that the company has, which is based on the open platform vis-a-vis the internet that allows it to succeed. Why should a small company like mine, which has great products, want to go or want to explore a partnership with a large player when I have every reason to not succeed in getting my product implemented with that company? How do I protect myself when I'm introducing these things? And they are innovations.
I don't know exactly your company, so I cannot give you advice how to protect your company. But there are several ways. For us, it's our source code, for example. We never give our source code. It is a very interesting analogy you draw. There we have Skype, and it's a highly competitive market. It's a telecom market, and there are no boundaries. There are no countries, right? Skype is everyone. Probably 80% of you has Skype on the computer, and the advantage of working with larger firms is they have client relations already, and as a smaller firm, you have to protect your business case. Otherwise, you don't exist. And it's rough sometimes. There have been a lot of opportunities we didn't take to protect our source code, for example. Because procurement, in general, if you work for governments, they ask the full rights on what you've developed. Like actually right now there's a client who wants our product, but the guys who have to sign the contract, they insist on getting our IP. Well, there's no business then. So you have to protect your business.
Okay, we have a couple of comments on that from Thomas and then from Gernot.
Okay, the issue regarding protection, I think, has been duly covered. I'm trying to answer your question. Why should you? Well, I don't know. Why not? Do you have an alternative? What is your purpose? What is your objective? If you find that you can benefit from that relationship with a large company because you want to enter quickly into the market, go ahead and do so. If you do believe firmly that you can conquer the market or survive in the market on your own or together with smaller players, go ahead and do it. That would be my suggestion, okay? I start to have a problem, and I want to be a little bit controversial here, when as a SME, as a small company, you go a third route, which is I will ask for some public funds and some subsidies because I'm small, okay, and my business is not working properly. Then, me, a large player, I start having a little problem with that, okay, because I see taxpayer money going into private interests. So I think it is a question of the market. When you are an entrepreneur, when you are a small, medium enterprise, you have to work with the market rules, and you have plenty of options in the market. So I think it is really a personal choice which route you want to go. But definitely the third one, I think SMEs need to be protected, favored, accompanied, etc., but it should not be subsidized. In the most innovative and entrepreneurial environments in this planet, the United States and Asia, SMEs and startups are not publicly subsidized. They use other ways and means to get at their goals and succeed.
Okay, Gernot, let's come to you. Are you going to talk from a buyer perspective and how you protect companies that you work with, or what is your comment?
Oh, we are 150 years old and we are still world leaders, so we're innovative ourselves in various cycles, including spin-offs, spin-outs, spin-ins on the topic. So I think especially the German economy is a very good example where big and small ecosystem can even survive some crises. So I think we should more work in this way together on the topic, especially when we put systems together. There's always room for even keeping your intellectual property for your pumping system or whatever you have without disclosing it, the more we go into innovation. I just wanted to make one point. We have to divide between, say, services for water, because I see it in Brussels many times that many politicians think there's a Steve Jobs sitting in his garage and he has a super idea and 3 years later he's a world leader. This does not work in the manufacturing sector, in the high investment, longer payback times on the topic. I do not see this, so I think we have to be careful when we discuss the role of startups, in which area do we play. I very much like your example, but I think for me it's more in the services area and to help than guide investments on the topic. But if you really want to invest on scale, and like I said, the world is not looking into Europe for the favorite place to be. We can choose that we only want to do it via SMEs, but then, okay, then we have a challenge with the world's impact that we want to grow.
Excellent. Okay. I'm going to bring a question. Mariana, I think you had a question in the front. There's a lady there as well. Yourself, sir. There's a couple over there. Let's have in the front row, please. The front row. Let's make it brief and please address one of the audience.
Thank you. Thank you. Florian, I have a question to you. We have the financial instruments as a barrier and bottlenecks, and we talked a lot about it today, but also in other circumstances. So I just would like to know, what is your view on this? Is it, for example, as your own experience, do you ever felt the need to go out and look for sort of financial support, and how did you perceive that? Was it an obstacle or was it just a normal part of your business?
Yeah, so finance is part of the business, otherwise you don't exist. And the question is, where do you get your finance from? At some point where you need to make your investment to get your business case running, there's a gap in your cash flow, so you need money. The question is, where do you get it from? Is there a subsidy or is there an investor? We have bootstrapped our company, so we've always worked for clients who were paying for the development we made for them, and they accepted, otherwise we wouldn't work for them. They accepted that what we've made for them, we can reuse for the future. So we never had any investments. We don't work with subsidies anymore. We had some, but subsidies are so difficult because you depend on systems that truly don't understand where you're going, and you depend on a committee that has the right to say stuff about your business where they truly don't understand what you're doing. So we decided not to do subsidies anymore. We're in the luxury position that we can make that decision. Is that an answer to your question? Yeah?
Okay. Let's move another question then to the lady here in the aisle. She has a red card in her hand, so I think you're in trouble, guys.
Okay, thank you. I'm Julia Martinez from the Iberian Foundation for a New Water Culture. And my question is for Mrs. Monica Scatasta, and it is related to financial instruments for financing innovative approaches, particularly regarding green infrastructures. I would like to know whether the European Bank of Investments has activity on this area of financing green infrastructure, because they are key for flood prevention and other water-related services by means of nature conservation and also nature restoration measures. Thank you very much.
Sure. Indeed, green infrastructure is an area that is a high priority for us. Well, we have both our traditional instruments and then some new instruments that we're looking into. With regards to traditional instruments, let's stay with green infrastructure, for instance, dealing with flood risk management. When we support flood risk management activities in a country, we always have a dialogue with the client to make sure that green infrastructure activities are part of the solutions. So this is something that we already support with our traditional funding for investment programs linked with, for instance, flood risk management. But this is also an area where we've been working for a while now, trying to push for finding solutions to increase also the leveraging of private funding. And we're not talking about privatization here, we're simply talking about private funding for green infrastructure. And I'd like to give you an example of the type of activities that we're looking at and trying to put together with the Commission, a facility that would help do just that. Imagine a situation where you have wetlands and where you have wetland protection providing potentially downstream benefits for a water company, reducing its treatment costs, etc. This is the type of setup where it would be possible to basically turn the benefits into a revenue stream coming from, say, the company itself. This, but other types of investment that would lead to protection and also green infra in general. We're trying to set up a facility to do just that. As I said before, it's under negotiation, so we're hoping that this is going to fly, and this is just another example of how much we focus on these issues as well.
Monica, thank you very much. We have a question here from this gentleman. We have time for about 3 or 4 more questions, but let's have a microphone down here at the front, please. And we had a couple of hands over there. I've seen yours, sir.
Jan Lemoine. It's not really a question, it's more a comment, so it's all for all the panels. I've got kind of a 6 barrier that I haven't seen here. I'm not sure it can be dealt with because it's embedded in human nature and the economic system. But one thing is that an investor, private investor in any case, will always go for the project which is the more profitable on a short term from an economic point of view, except if he's got very strong ethic principles. I think that will lead him to go for projects which are not always meant, let's say, to serve the greater good, and which are of most interest for all the community, so there can be innovation. So he'll go maybe easier towards supporting Barcelona Football Club, for example, rather than support a water treatment new technology which will enable to, I don't know, to give clean water to people all over the world. And I'm not saying, I know it's very complicated, I don't have any solutions for this, but I really think this is one of the bottlenecks in the whole system and which hasn't been managed. Of course, the public investors should take over because their purpose is supposedly to look at the public interest over a long term, but we've seen that public authorities have less and less power in terms of investments, and well, that's a huge debate in the European Union right now. But anyway, that's just one of the barriers which is not there, and I think it's really at the core of the problem. Thanks.
Okay, I'd actually like to put this to Pete whilst we've got him with us, because he also invests in technologies, innovation, in your night job or day job. I'm not sure which is which exactly. But is water such an uninteresting area to invest in? Are the gains only very long-term and marginal?
Oh, well, thank you. I'll just stand up so you can look at me. I think water is indeed, it's got to compete with other and sometimes easier investment targets, except when you fence off, as one of our clients has done, a part of our assets under management to target solutions to specific themes. And then it becomes more interesting. Now, it's true that commercial or quasi-commercial investors like pension funds and their asset managers always go for a financial return. We have to pay out pensions at the end of the day. So curb your enthusiasm, if you want to corner me over drinks, you still need to make money, as far as we're concerned at least. I think, however, that there's different approaches to this, one more promising perhaps to innovation than another. When we talk about a financial return, we talk about it as a condition, not as an objective. We don't need to outperform the market. We only need to keep pace with our liabilities. So a 10% return in private equity or a 6% return in public equity is good enough. Outperformance, at least for that impact investment bit that we fenced off, is defined in terms of what social impact do we make. And we need to account for that too, obviously. So moving from outperformance, being smarter than the rest of the market, to achieving a financial return that's good enough is a key step, I believe, that we need to take. If at least you really want to make a dent in this water problem and these other three themes.
Okay, we have a comment here from both Monica and from Gernot.
May just short. These things are interlinked. I do not favor a discussion that we put all these individual now. For instance, if I'm an investor and I see 60,000 different regulations in Europe, I get distrust. So simply doing something on that side would already help me invest, because I do not want only in Seville. I want my investment, which technology I have, I want also it to fly in Helsinki on the topic. That would be, so I think we should not discuss them only in separation. That was just my...
Excellent point.
I just wanted to, I think that there are two answers to the question, and one is the issue that you just mentioned. In the context of a fund having to invest, I think even not looking at the innovation part, but just looking at investment in the water sector can provide that low but steady kind of return that kind of in a way anchors you at the base and could be interesting for that. Then the question is the financing for innovation, and there the question is twofold. It's the issue of identifying maybe those areas where payback period might be shorter, but also trying to do something to either reduce the time that it takes for uptake of the technology, and therefore all the discussion that we were having earlier about the demonstration activities, or to try and set up some instruments where you have you ask for extra patience because you want to focus on a specific sector. Whether that is possible, to what extent that creates distortions, etc. It's one of the areas that we're discussing at the moment here.
Cate, over to you.
Yes, I'd just like to challenge the whole idea that you have to sacrifice financial success for environmental returns. There's a lot of experience, a lot of evidence out there at the moment that sort of disproves that idea to a certain extent, and of course it depends on the environmental metric that you're measuring. CDP, for example, has just taken a look at the corporate performance of those companies that have performed very, 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 very well on our climate change leadership index versus their financial performance over the year, and have proven that those companies that are doing well are also financially performing extremely well, where they either track or do outperform the global average. We've only got 4 years worth of water data at the moment, but we hope to be able to prove similar trends where that investing in positive measures that safeguard and protect water resources can also lead to strong and stable financial returns.
Excellent, thank you. There were some questions over there on the left-hand side. Yes, please.
Thank you. As a political scientist who represents the sector of research and development, I'm interested very much in the question of dissemination. The water sector, compared to the energy sector, has failed in reaching the general public. We're talking about a global issue. We're talking about officially the issue which is considered to be one of the top 3 problems facing mankind in the 21st century. And yet the only people in this conference are people interested in this area as a business or as their way of life. We have not been able to attract here in Barcelona the general public. If this was energy, again, if this was energy, if this was sustainable transport, if this was parks, we would have a large proportion of people here who are not involved in the subject as a business. So what I would like to ask all the members are, have you failed to disseminate? Have you failed to reach the general public, or have you succeeded because you're not interested in reaching the general public?
Okay, very provocative. Thomas, let's give this to you to start with. Is that okay? You're in Barcelona. There was a very clear link to Barcelona in that. So please tackle that one.
That's toughy, Richard? Look, we are a municipal water operator, right? And we'll go as a company through all lengths and all expenses to explain our case and what we do as good as possible. That is not to say that we have done enough or not. But one thing we may not do, contrary to the energy sector, we may not publicize the high quality of our water. We are not allowed to do it, okay? We spend money on climate change, we spend money on, we're doing groundwater recharge here in Barcelona. I don't know if anybody knows about this, but we're doing it a couple kilometers away from it. And whether you believe it or not, we are doing it for free. We are looking for a model that pays us for that future recharge, because I think there could be more. So I agree with you that there is a problem communicating the water issue to the general public. Why? And I think that the administrations and municipalities and other stakeholders involved have a lot to do with that also, because we take water for granted. Water is, yes, a human right, but the treatment of water, the distribution of water, the production of higher quality water, etc., does not come for free. So I think this whole communication problem has something to do with almost a religious issue. People understand that water is a right that they have. It should be for free, and free means total gratis. We have the same issue in the internet, okay? The internet is for the time being total gratis, but at the end we pay for it in 20,000 different ways. So this is something cultural that we need to change. As we have seen, when some companies run out of water or lose their permit, or there plainly is no water, like in Singapore, or there will not be no water in in the future, then I think this communication issue, which you properly have raised, disappears quickly.
Now, Monica was a big advocate in the session earlier about public communication, engaging with the voter, as you put it. What's your view on this? And let's keep it brief, please. We have a number of questions still.
I couldn't agree more. I think that we have failed. I've been repeating that for years. I sound like a broken record for those people that have heard me on countless occasions. The profession has failed, and we have to own up to it. We cannot continue saying the public doesn't get it. It's true, by the way. But we cannot use that as an excuse. We cannot hide behind that. It is true that it's much easier, the slogans that have been used on a number of occasions, and the misunderstanding. We have to take over, again, the meaning of words. The meaning of key words at the moment are owned by somebody else. And we have to take that over again and explain, and especially explain in a way that can be understood by everybody else. And the problem is that we're always between us. And this is not conducive to understanding what drives other people, what the meaning of word public-private partnership is in somebody else's head, what water resources, what public good mean in other people. As experts, we simply take it for granted. Okay, so stop there with regards to the self-flagellation, but it's important that we continue self-flagellating on this one. There is an issue that I see in Europe that I do not see when I work in developing countries, and there I agree with you. The fact that we have, for decades, simply opened the tap and out came decent water does not play in our favor in Europe. People do take something for granted. You see a completely different attitude towards the value of water, towards the importance thereof in those countries where access to services is not an obvious thing. How do we deal with that, however? We are in that reality, so we got to do something different.
Okay, Richard, you might have started an uprising, but you have some Italian support at least. I'm going to move on from that topic, if that's okay. We had a question here, and we have time really just for two more. So, sir.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, I like your conference a lot, I must say. That's my first statement. My second statement is that I'm a little bit confused by the barriers and bottlenecks discussion we have now, especially when it comes to financial instruments. We all know that Europe consists of, let's say, 80% of small and medium-sized firms. Many, by the way, are active in the water sector, as I know from my benchmark work, my benchmark everyday, day-to-day work. Now, I was a little bit astonished because I had an EIB representative. I had a representative of PGGM, and they declared here in the forum that they had lots and lots and lots of money, but unfortunately not available for small and medium-sized. Then I had Florian, I must say. He has a very nice company, and I wish him lots of success, and I think he will get it. And he says, what I would say in Holland, the dood of the gladiolen, but for me, no subsidies anymore. Mr. Klotz said, as far as subsidies, you're dead anyway. That's what he said. If you rely on the subsidies, you're dead anyway. And now my confusion is this. Don't we think that there is not only a bottleneck for innovation, but a bottleneck that is far more, the gap is far more wide than we thought it would be in financing that innovation? Because if we could not solve that problem, we can never solve the problem of innovation itself. Perhaps, Mr. Klotz, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes, Gernot, please. What do we mean with this exact bottleneck?
This financial bottleneck. No, the issue is, and I didn't say there is, if you have subsidies, you're done and dusted. It's just for a certain time we need, for a certain phase of the innovation cycle. We might need public support, but at a certain stage, as was said sometime, you have to fly alone on the topic. And that's why I come back to all the other topics as well. When we discussed this at the task force, it was not that the financial as such is there, but why is it going somewhere else? Why it is going to the energy sector? Why it is going into other things? And I think that was one of the reasons why we said the procurement, everybody shouts procurement. It does not work as we did it in the last 10, 20 years. So obviously something is wrong. Then we talked about public-private partnership, and we recognize that we're completely segmented, and even now in the sector, but also towards other sectors, like I said, the manufacturing and other. So I think, and I come back to you, we failed to make the point that water is a resource for the whole economy on the topic, and therefore, like the energy people have done, like the oil bioeconomy people have done on the topic. So I think that was my saying, that we have to create a dynamic system of funding on the topic, but we also need scale if we want to play in a European or in a global playing field. Now we might say, again, this is a public good. It's like a town hall economy. You just pull it all back, and then we shut off our market for water for international competition. It's just a choice. But if we want to play at global level, I think we need a more dynamic system on the topic.
Excellent.
Just
Monica, you're burning to say something?
No, just a clarification. I mean, for the record, the EIB supports SMEs through hundreds of intermediated instruments. And my whole presentation was about the instruments that we also have to support innovating SMEs. So the EIB does support SMEs, and in fact, it's one of the key policy priorities for the EIB.
So, we have Monica on one side of the bar later, and we're going to have Pete on the other side of the bar, and everybody can queue from both sides. Pete, you had a comment, I think, before we go into this. You have a comment on this particular issue?
Very quickly, Monica already mentioned it. That, there's a way...
If you could use the mic, because we have about 350,000 web streamers at home. Okay. Who can only hear you if you go through the mic.
I think there may be a way to solve this. It's not easy, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be sitting here. But SMEs are for mainstream institutional investors simply too small. So we need to aggregate this. This is what I meant with my comment on aggregation. And we need institutions like EIB to do this. Now the good news these days is that money is almost free. So there's instruments, fixed income instruments, bonds, that don't need to bring in a whole ton of money anymore. The challenge is organizing, aggregating those opportunities that I hear about all day long into investable instruments, investable vehicles that are big enough for us to pour money into. So EIB bonds, for example, is an excellent way to bridge this financing challenge or financing gap.
Excellent. We have time for just one more question. It belongs to this gentleman here. I'll keep it.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Olivier Seberio. My company is called Resolute Marine Energy. And I reacted to the comments made by Thomas earlier about the fact that in the US, innovation are not subsidized. Our company is based in Boston, and we're actually moving to Ireland now to actually get closer to Europe, which is good because I'm French. The point is, actually, in the US, innovation is highly subsidized. There are programs called SBR, Small Business Innovation and Research, where tons of money are spent to startups like us to promote innovation. The Department of Energy has a program called ARPA-E, the Department of Defense has DARPA. So really tons of money are actually spent on small business to help them innovate and bridge this gap between idea and commercialization. And we have been a beneficiary of this kind of support. We have leveraged something like $5 million, which enable us then to actually get private investment, VC, or angel investor investing in us. So I would say that's one first comment. The second thing is that this program, SBR, are actually not perfect. And I found that in the Horizon 2020 program, a better adaptation of what the US has implemented. The advantage that I found coming from the US of the Horizon 2020 is that it's actually much more adapted to commercialization of new ideas, because it enables us to include not only R&D effort, but also dissemination, IP protection, etc., that cannot be financed in the US through grants. So I think I'm a big fan of the Horizon 2020 program for that, because it's actually, I'm sorry, I'm speaking too quickly. So it's actually enabled us to match the grant we receive with our own commercial deployment plan. So my question is, because I need to have a question with a question mark at the end, is actually to you, now that I'm assuming that you believe me that in the US actually the innovation is highly subsidized, how would you change your mind so that maybe financial instruments, I mean, would you change your mind? I would leave that open.
I have no problem at all with changing my mind. Maybe I was wrong and you are right. Okay, I do think these numbers have to be taken integrally. Okay, you have to compare the absolute numbers of the amount of private investment and money that is being invested into innovation in the US versus the public money. I know an awful lot of money goes into basic research in the United States, and the problems you mentioned also are there. So it's a problem of absolute and relative figures. But I have no problem with changing my mind, and I'm very, very glad that you find an excellent vehicle and tool in Horizon 2020 to do what you exactly need to do. I think this is why the European Commission has changed from the FP7, let's say, approach to this new Horizon 2020 approach, which from the EIP on water, by the way, and as WSSDP, we fully support. So the question is not, is Horizon 2020 good enough, or is it good at all? It is excellent. I guess what we are all saying is we need more than that. And my opinion, and that one I will not change, is I fully agree with Gernot. If innovation is taking the R&D to the market, at the end you need a market. And the market is private money.
Okay, Gernot, you're going to comment on this. I'd like to ask you as well to conclude the session then with your comments.
Okay. No, I just wanted to come back. I take my other hat. I'm the chairman of the advisory group with the Commission on the Horizon 2020 industrial program. The Horizon will stop at TRL level 6. Otherwise, if we go into higher tiered, simply the money will run short. So we have to find other ways. That's one topic. The other one is at least the US has one funding system in different things. We have at least 28 funding system because there's so much goodwill for SMEs. And in one technology in Germany, we have 250 funding schemes for SMEs. Unfortunately, we have only 180 SMEs working in that field. You know, so comes back to the fragmentation topic. We do not have an SME policy. And if you look for Horizon 2020 to pull you through, I think you should look somewhere else. I'm not saying you will be lost on the topic.
Gernot, please say, from the discussion you've had here right now, some very controversial points, some different points. What input have you taken considering the 5 low-hanging fruits which have been identified as barriers to solve soon? What things might change even maybe in your mind now?
I think it's really the sense of urgency that we cannot discuss forever. So I think I would ask the various working groups that we have at least in a few months some concrete things that we should just start off to give a good image to the water sector as well, because it takes some time. You know, if I look at it from the outside, it might be not so attractive. I think, again, combining these topics, because none of them alone are there, and I think we need also some leadership from the higher level to say, we want a common European market, and we would like to do this. Otherwise, you know, we'll be bottom up is good, but you need some, and that's what you have in the US. At least they have the policy. I'm not always agreeing with them, but at least they know where they go. And I'm not so sure if in Europe, in the water area, we know where we're going. And until we know, I think the offer is, at least from our side, from the manufacturing sector, we have also the famous public-private partnership. And there we integrate the water reuse and recycling together with energy topics, with feedstock topics, with new production lines. So I think just in the industrial side, a singular water does not really make sense, because you'll not renovate your whole company just because of the water issue. You do it in certain cycles, and if it comes along and water has something to give to you, you take it along.
Well, we look forward to seeing that sense of urgency turned into concrete solutions by the time we meet in a year's time, wherever that will be at the EIP Water Conference 2015. Thank you very much to our panelists. Let's have a big round of applause for them, please. Thank you. whilst I do just a touch of housekeeping before we close the conference, I'd like you to get your red and green voting cards out. They're going to come into some use in just a second. Remember, please, your questionnaire. Again, a plug for the questionnaire so we can try and continually improve the conference and get more value for you. The exhibition will be open, of course, until about 7:30. There'll be some hors d'oeuvres and some drinks there as well. A good opportunity to carry on our networking. And a big thanks again to the City of Barcelona for helping to support that. We're looking forward to some wonderful tapas. So, I ask you to dig out your cards, and I'd like to have 2 votes, please, which we're just going to have a bit of fun with here. The first question I have to you is, have you made a connection at this conference that's going to help boost innovation in water? Green if yes, red if no. Please show us your cards. Okay, well, we certainly have a majority which is green. The reds we're going to take by the hand this evening and take you around the exhibition and build some connections. But I think we had about 80% green in there, so that's a positive sign, but there's still some room for improvement, I can see that, but we have a couple of hours yet. The second question I have to you is, and this is reflecting really on EIP Water and some of the things which you've seen today, are you confident that EIP Water is a catalyst for fostering innovation in the water sector in Europe? Again, green and red. Yeah, we have even more green here, which is nice to see. We have some which are skeptical. There's green and red. Some which are highly skeptical and not confident. So we still need to do a little bit of work on those people, Mariana. But I think we certainly have a majority for green, something like 95%, I would guess, just from those voting cards. That's it from me so far. I'd like to ask now Mariana Wenning again to come and join us and to close the conference and give us your reflections on what you've experienced during this day and how we're going to get the people who've not yet connected in the next couple of hours remaining connected to innovation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. And I'm afraid you have to deal with me again now at the end of the day. I would like to convey the sincere apologies of my Director General, Karl Falkenberg. He had a problem. He didn't have a problem. The plane had a technical defect and couldn't take off, and there was no other way to come to Barcelona to take his role this evening. And knowing my Director General, having worked with him now for more than 5 years, I think we are not so far off in our messages that we give on occasions like this. First of all, I would like to thank everybody, all the participants, the speakers, the panelists, Andrew, you for the wonderful work that you have done. I mean, from the green cards that I saw, for the number of them, I think we can say that this was a successful event, at least in the sense that there was active participation. Everybody seemed to have a great interest and also play their role. The audience was engaged in a way that I have to say I rarely see in a conference, and I'm therefore also very happy that this has been the case. Now we have, I think, made the circle very well from this morning where we talked or where the State Secretary started to lay out the concept of innovation in sort of broad terms. When we moved then from private companies to the member states, the public intervention or the public participation in finding solutions that also come from the EIP. We talked about technological governance issues, financial issues. This afternoon we have heard a lot about the financial side of it. We have heard a lot about the action groups, what they can actually contribute to the solutions and to the problems or the solution of the problems, I should rather say, that we are looking for. So overall, I would say this day was a very worthwhile day, and I think a very good step in the process of carrying this EIP further. So we have been on a good road. We have achieved a number of milestones maybe that we have set out at the beginning. And here I would like to come back to the original thoughts that were set out when we started with the EIP, and that were very much also driven by our commissioner, our former commissioner, Mr. Potočnik, whose aim was really to get the innovation debate in the water sector going, because he felt that that could give solutions to the environmental problems that we are facing in this sector, be it scarcity or be it water quality or any other issues that we have heard about today. So the set out of this whole exercise really was to find ways that bring us environmentally further, that give us the confidence that we can develop with the economic growth that we are looking for, and the employment also in a way that is environmentally sustainable. And having said that, however, I mentioned already the sort of economic growth employment dimension, and somebody this afternoon made, I think it was you, Thomas, made reference to Mr. Juncker's principle. I think it is indeed very important that if this EIP is going to go for further success under the new Commission, that we, I think, in a reinforced way, look of how we can bring the environmental pillar of this partnership together with the debate on increasing economic growth and increasing employment. So if we want to make our policy case, and I understood that all of you want to do that, because there were also some expectations given here from a number of you, then indeed we will have to look at all of these three components. So what do we need to do in the future to drive the process further? I think, and I would like to go back in that sense a little bit to what I've said this morning. I think we are looking, now that we have put the process on the rails, we are looking for concrete results. We need to focus our resources, our limited resources that we have, to those issues that are of utmost importance and that we think we need to find solutions. So focusing is one of the main issues that we need to do. The other one is that we need to look closely at whom do we want to serve with innovation. And in the debate this morning, in the panel with the representatives of 4 member states, I think we saw very clearly that there are many, many problems on the ground that you, as active participants in the EIP and or in the action group, can actually help resolving. But I felt that in the debate, and I mean this was I think very well shown by the rating that Harry had sort of invented, that there is still quite a lot of, let's say, I wouldn't say misunderstanding, but maybe non-understanding or difficulties in understanding each other of those who have the problems and those who can provide the solution. So I would think that one of the big tasks here is really to continue communicating, continue talking to each other in a very sort of continuous way. The networking at lunchtime and the evening, I'm sure, will help on this, but I think even outside this conference, we have to do this in a sort of more enhanced way as what we have done so far. And related to that, I think, is one of the concerns that was mentioned here on a number of occasions, that we cannot just stay with our own audience. We have to go outside and we have to make clear to the normal people, women and men on the street, that water is an issue that is of concern to all of us and that they have a say in that. And if solutions have to be found at the local or the regional level, then they are the ones that should participate in that. And only if they do this, and if they really take it to heart, they will also in the end influence the policymakers. We can talk here for many years among ourselves. Maybe that doesn't really reach the policymaker, but if you have the public with you, then I'm sure that there is some more thinking about how and what we can do also with regard to water and innovation. So this is very important. Just a few words on the obstacles. We have named them. The task force had sort of built them up in their many discussions. As was said, I think, by one of the participants, we can't look at them only in isolation. But on the other hand, I also have to say that, again, due to sort of, I think, limited resources, we also will have to focus there and make a choice what are the main obstacles that we want to tackle now. We can tackle others maybe later, but what do we want to do now and how we are going to resolve these obstacles? We, as the European Commission, will stay engaged in the process, and even more, we will continue to steer this debate on the sort of more strategic nature of the EIP, and also we will try what we can do to enable this framework that is conducive to water innovation. From my side, I can say, obviously, I will inform, and now, we have a new commission, we have a new commissioner, we have, in general, a new structure, so we still will have to see how all of this is going to work in practice. But as you also know from Mr. Juncker's messages, everything will get better. So we are working towards this, and I will inform, first of all, Karl Falkenberg about the results and the conclusions, so to speak, about this conference, of this conference, and then also my new commissioner, Vela, in order to bring the message how important the EIP water is and the ideas that came out of today's debate to drive this process further, both to the benefit of everybody, the environmental side, the business side, and I would say also the overall economic side. So with this, I again would like to express my warm thanks to all of you that have participated, but again to those who have helped that this conference could take place, the municipality of Barcelona, the Catalan regional government, the National Ministry of Research and Innovation, to Setaqua and Akbar, and I wish you again all the best for your field visits tomorrow, also for the networking opportunities that you have this evening, and the action groups that I understand also meet back-to-back tomorrow. So let's keep on doing the networking. Let's also keep on doing the work in the action groups towards focused results. And I'm looking forward to see you all again, not only in a year's time, probably in the interim in some other sort of contacts. Until then, I wish you all the best, and thank you very much, Andrew, and thank you for moderating this conference so successfully. Thank you.